The sky over Lumea was soft blue with silver clouds that drifted slowly over the tall trees. The world was quiet. The wind moved through the leaves, making a sound like music. The research ship Aurora 9 stood on a flat clearing surrounded by glowing plants at night. The light from the ship and the light from the forest mixed together like two colors that had never touched before. Inside the human base, a young man named Aaron sat behind a clear wall made of strong energy. The wall shined faintly, like water. He worked there as a communication officer. His job was to observe the native people called the Lumians. They looked almost human, but they had long, soft ears shaped like those of a fox. Their eyes were bright and calm. Their voices carried strange tones that felt like songs. The rules said no human should cross the barrier. No Lumian should come close. Contact was forbidden. Aaron had been on Lumia for 5 months. He liked the calm nights here. The world was peaceful and alive in a way. Earth was not. But he also felt lonely. Sometimes he watched the Lumians from his screen. They lived in the forest in small groups. They seemed gentle, kind, and curious. Sometimes he wondered what they thought of humans living behind glass walls, watching them like ghosts one evening. When the light began to fade, Aaron saw movement near the outer field. He turned his screen to zoom in. A small figure stood near the barrier. Her silver hair glowed under the twin moons. Her tail moved slowly behind her. She looked young, maybe his own age. She was holding a glowing stone in her hand when she looked up. He saw her eyes. They were gold like firelight. She raised her head and spoke. Her voice came softly through the speaker connected to the observation. "Mike," she said, "why can't we touch humans?" Aaron froze. Her words sounded sad and gentle. He had never heard a Lumian speak English before. It was broken but clear. He pressed the mic button and said, "You can talk to me. Who taught you that language?" She smiled and said, "I listened to the sky voices." She pointed at the speakers on the tower. She had learned their words just by listening. He did not know what to say. Her question stayed in his mind. Why can't we touch humans? He had heard the rule many times since training. The commander always said no contact, it causes reaction. The science team said human touch could harm their energy field. That was all, but no one had ever explained why. Not clearly. He looked at her through the glass. She was standing very near the edge, her hand raised slightly as if she wanted to touch the wall. Her fingers stopped just short of the shimmering surface. The barrier hummed softly between them. Aaron felt a strange pull, like he wanted to reach back. But he knew better, so he said softly, "It's not safe." She tilted her head. Her voice dropped like a whisper. "Not safe for who? For both of us." He said, "The energy field keeps everyone safe." She nodded slowly, but her eyes showed she didn't believe it. She pressed her palm against the invisible line. The light glowed brighter between them. The system alarm blinked, a small warning. Aaron's heart raced. He turned off the alert before it reached the main console. She stepped back quickly when she saw the light fade. Her expression turned sorry. She said, "I did not want to harm." He smiled a little and said, "It's all right, you didn't." She looked around the sky, turning darker now. The moon's climbing higher. The glow of the plants shimmered across her face. She said softly, "Humans watch, but they never walk among us. Why you build walls even in sky?" He had no answer. The words cut deeper than he expected. Maybe it was true. Maybe humans were afraid of what they didn't understand. He wanted to tell her about Earth, about the cities and the rules and the fears, but he just said it's complicated. She lowered her head, then said, "I will come again tomorrow." "Maybe you will have an answer next time." Before he could speak, she turned and ran into the forest. Her hair shimmered until the trees hid her completely. Aaron sat there for a long time. He looked at the barrier still glowing faintly under the moonlight. The room was quiet except for the hum of the machines. He touched the glass lightly. From his side it felt cold and hard. He thought of her question again. Why can't we touch humans? He whispered the words to himself as if trying to find meaning in them. When his shift ended, he walked out of the lab into the open corridor. The other crew members were asleep. He looked out through the dome window into the forest somewhere out there. She might be looking at the stars just like he was, two beings under the same sky, but worlds apart. The thought stayed with him all night. He didn't know why her voice had moved him so much, maybe because it carried something he hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity and sorrow together, like hope wrapped in loneliness. The next day he woke early before the shift began. He walked again to the observation chamber, waiting without reason. Maybe she would come again. He told himself it was just curiosity, but deep inside he felt something else. A quiet wish that the barrier might one day fall, and that maybe her question could finally be answered. The next morning, the air over Lumia was fresh and full of mist. Small drops of silver dew covered the grass around the human base. The sky looked pale blue and quiet. Aaron sat at his desk, early, waiting for something he could not name. He kept looking at the outer screen that showed the barrier line. Maybe she would come again. Maybe it had only been a dream, but deep inside he hoped she would return. The forest beyond the wall was calm. The tall glowing leaves swayed with the breeze for hours. Nothing happened then near noon. The system picked a movement on the edge. Aaron's heart jumped. He looked closely through the clear glass, and there she was again. Sari, her silver hair shining under the twin suns. She walked closer with slow, careful steps. This time she carried a small flower, glowing faint blue. She stopped just short of the barrier and smiled at him. He pressed the mic button and said, "You came back." She nodded softly. Her tail moved behind her like a slow rhythm. "I said I would." She replied, "I brought you something. It's from the forest. It helps when hearts are heavy." Aaron smiled gently. "You mean it heals sadness?" She thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, that is what my people say." He wished he could take the flower, but it would burn against the barrier. Instead, he said, "It's beautiful, thank you." She smiled again, her eyes bright like light in still water. For a while they talked. He told her about Earth, about blue oceans, and long roads and snow that fell from the sky. She listened like a child hearing a story for the first time when he told her that snow was cold and soft. She laughed softly and said, "We have light dust. It floats in the air when the moons change color, but not like your snow." Aaron found himself smiling without even knowing why. Then Sari asked him another question. "Your kind came from far away to watch us. Why do you study us?" Aaron thought about the answer he wanted to say, "Because we want to understand," but it felt empty. Finally, he said, "Maybe we came to see what we forgot about ourselves." Her ears moved slightly in confusion. He explained softly, "We live in metal homes. We travel in ships. We stopped listening to wind or light. Maybe when we watch your people, we remember how life used to feel." Sari seemed to understand. She said softly, "We watch the stars for the same reason, to remember where we came from." A soft wind passed between them. It carried small white petals from the trees. Sari looked at them dancing through the air and said, "The sky sends gifts to those who listen." She raised her hand as if to catch one. The petals floated near the barrier and vanished in the hum of energy. Her hand stopped just short of it again, and Aaron could see the sadness in her face. She whispered, "Your world and mine do not touch." He wanted to tell her it was not her fault, but his voice caught inside him. He remembered the training videos that said, "Do not make contact. Do not trust the natives." The reaction could be fatal, but watching her stand there with that lost look, he started to wonder if those warnings were only half true. When she saw his silence, she asked quietly, "Is it true that we hurt you if we touch?" He hesitated. The scientist said it was dangerous, but he had never seen proof. He said, "Maybe long ago something went wrong." She looked down at the glowing flower in her hand and said, "Then maybe it is not us who harm. Maybe it is fear." Her words stayed in the air between them, simple but heavy like truth. Spoken too late, he felt something move inside him like a quiet crack in stone. He wanted to tell her that maybe she was right. But before he could, the comm on his wrist buzzed. It was the control room. They were asking for a report. He turned the mic off quickly and said, "I have to go." She nodded slowly and said, "Then I will wait again." Her voice was calm but carried a trace of longing. That night Aaron could not sleep. The stars outside the dome seemed brighter. He thought about Sari, her golden eyes, the way her voice sounded when she said fear. He opened his tablet and searched the old mission files. Most were locked. but he found one from the first human landing 50 years ago. It showed humans standing near Lumians. No barrier. Then only open air. One frame caught his eye, a Lumian elder touching a human's shoulder, both smiling. The file ended, suddenly marked restricted data. The next morning he woke early again when he entered the lab. His commander passed by and said, "The natives have been active near the fence, stay alert." Aaron nodded, pretending not to care, but his mind was already in the forest when he reached the barrier. She was there, waiting, sitting on a stone near the glowing plants. She looked up as he approached and said softly, "You came?" He smiled. "Yes, and I brought something." He held a small music player to the mic and played a song from Earth. It was soft, slow, and full of warmth. Sari's ears lifted as the notes filled the air. She closed her eyes, the sound, shot through the barrier like a river of light. When it ended, she opened her eyes again. There were tears in them, she whispered. "Your world sings with feeling." Aaron smiled. "It is called music." She repeated the word slowly as if it were sacred. They stood there for a long time, saying little, only sharing the quiet through the glass. When the twin suns began to fall behind the forest, Sari said, "I think I begin to understand humans." And he asked, "What do you understand?" She said, "You feel too much, and then you build walls so the feeling will not hurt you." He looked at her, not knowing what to say. She smiled softly and turned toward the forest. "See you when the moons rise," she said before walking away. Aaron watched her until the trees swallowed her light again. He leaned against the glass and whispered to himself, "Maybe you are right. Maybe we built too many walls." He stayed there until the stars appeared above the dome, wondering if a single touch could really change everything. The next day came with quiet rain. It was not real water rain, but thin silver mist that floated down from the upper sky and shimmered like dust. The world of Lumea looked peaceful under it. The plants glowed softer, and the barrier hummed like a sleeping song. Aaron sat again in his small chair, staring at the line between their worlds. He had not told anyone about Sari. No one would understand. He had tried to stop thinking about her, but her words would not leave his mind. "You feel too much, and then you build walls so the feeling will not hurt you." It was simple, but it felt true. Every time he looked at the glass, it felt colder than before. As the day went on, the scanners showed movement near the forest. Aaron leaned forward. It was Sari again. She was walking slower than usual, holding something in both hands when she reached the edge. She looked tired. Her clothes were damp from the mist. She said softly, "The forest is angry today. It hums too loud." He smiled gently. "It is only the storm, clouds." She shook her head. "Not the sky. The ground hums." She bent down and touched the soil beside the barrier. Her eyes closed for a moment. Then she said, "Something old is waking." He didn't understand what she meant, but before he could ask, she looked up again and said, "I brought something for you." She held out a small wooden box. It looked carved by hand, full of tiny shapes like stars and waves. She said, "This is a memory box. My people use it to hold moments. I made one for you. I filled it with sound and scent. When you open it, it remembers the forest." He wished he could take it, but the barrier made that impossible. He said softly, "I wish I could hold it." She looked at the box and then at him. Her tail moved slowly. "I will keep it safe until you can," she said. Her words made him feel something heavy and warm inside, a promise he had not asked for, but now could not forget. For a while, they stood there listening to the hum of the barrier. Then Aaron said, "Sorry. Why do you keep coming here? You could get in trouble." Her eyes softened and she said, "Maybe I want to learn why humans fear light so much." He looked confused. She explained, "Your barrier shines bright, but it hides you from touch, from air, from world. You hide in light." The words hit him again with quiet truth. He whispered, "Maybe we do." The wind blew stronger. The leaves swayed high above them. The field sensors blinked, warning of rising storm. But Sari stayed there. Her hair lifting in the wind, she said, "I dream sometimes of walking among your kind. I dream of feeling what you call warmth." He wanted to tell her that warmth could be shared, but he remembered the old videos, the ban, the rules. Instead, he said, "Maybe someday." She smiled softly. Maybe someday. That night, the storm came harder. Lightning flashed through the sky and thunder rolled over the forest. Aaron could not sleep. He sat at his console watching the barrier lines through the feed. Sometimes they flickered weakly. The wind pushed hard against the dome. He heard distant alarms from the generator. Then suddenly one of the outer sensors went dark. He frowned and checked the camera. It showed part of the field near Sector 4, damaged by fallen branches. He reported it. But the system was too busy with other warnings. He decided to go check it himself. He put on his coat and walked out into the rain. It hissed softly against the metal floor. Lights flickered as he stepped closer to the damaged edge. He stopped when he saw a faint shadow near the tree. Sari was there standing under the glowing branches. She saw him and smiled through the rain. "What are you doing out here?" he said softly. She pointed to the barrier. It was flickering weakly, almost invisible. She said, "The light is hurt. It needs healing." He looked at the control pad. It was true, the power line had broken. A storm surge had shorted the relay. He tried to fix the connector, but one side was buried in mud. He said, "We must wait for the repair team." She looked at the barrier and then at him. The light between them was fading like a heartbeat, slowing down. She said quietly, "If the light dies, what happens?" He hesitated. "It will restart soon," he said. But she kept looking at him with that same soft sadness and said, "Then maybe, for a breath, our worlds will be one." The barrier flickered again. The air filled with static. Aaron felt the hairs on his arms rise. He took a slow step back, but before he could speak, lightning flashed overhead, and the sound shook the ground. The light around them dimmed completely. For one long moment there was no wall, only the thin mist and the falling rain. He froze. She was standing right there, only a few feet away, her eyes wide with wonder. The world went silent, except for the sound of rain. She lifted her hand slowly, like she was afraid the moment would break. He didn't move. Her fingers touched the air between them. Where the barrier used to be, a drop of rain slid down her palm and fell on his sleeve. His breath caught. He felt the warmth of her presence, close but not touching. They looked at each other through the mist, both afraid to move. Then the power blinked back on the barrier, returned with a flash of pale light. She stepped back quickly, her tail trembling. He whispered, "Are you all right?" She nodded, her eyes still shining like wet gold. That was the first time she had seen the barrier fall, and the first time he had seen what freedom looked like. Her voice came low through the hum again. "I felt nothing bad," she said. Only light. Aaron stared at the glowing wall between them again. The storm faded, but his heart did not. He knew the rules would call this a near breach, but he also knew something else. The truth was not what they had been told. Maybe human touch was not poison. Maybe it was the cure both worlds had been waiting for. As Sari turned to leave, she said softly, "Next time I will bring the song of my people. Maybe it will heal your light." Aaron watched her disappear into the forest, the mist rising around her like silver smoke. He stayed there for a long time under the rain, listening to the faint hum of the repaired barrier and thinking that maybe the world beyond the glass was not so far after all. The days after the storm passed quietly. The air over Lumia smelled. Kiel stood by the same place near the barrier where the storm had broken the field. Her silver hair was tied back this time. Her hands held a small wooden flute. She smiled when she saw him. He walked closer to the glass and said, "You are safe. I was worried." She nodded. "I am safe. The forest sings again. The ground is calm now." He smiled. "Good." Then he asked, "What is that in your hand?" She lifted the flute. "This is my promise. I said I would bring the song of my people. Maybe it can heal light." He sat down near the glass. She sat on the other side, both facing each other as the soft hum filled the space. Then she raised the flute to her lips and played. The sound that came out was unlike anything he had ever heard. It was slow and deep, but also full of life. The tone moved through the barrier like wind through water. It filled the whole field with a strange calm. The machines around him went quiet. The readings flattened, the hum of the wall softened, and for the first time since he came to Lumea, the air felt alive, like it was breathing with them. When she finished playing, he looked at the control screen. The energy field looked stable, smoother than ever. He turned back to her, amazed it really did heal the light. She smiled her tail, moved lightly behind her. Music carries peace. She said it speaks to what light cannot. Aaron stared at her for a moment, thinking how simple she made it sound. He said softly, "On Earth, we forget to listen to things that have no words." She tilted her head, then said, "Maybe that is why you came to our sky, to remember again, O harm, but to comfort." She touched his fingers. The light grew brighter. Then the image cut off. The last note on the file said, "Reaction unknown." Aaron watched it again and again and noticed the human had been injured before the touch. Maybe his pain had triggered the reaction, not the contact itself. The field around them had glowed gold, like Sari's hands when she played the flute. It did not look like death, it looked like healing unfinished. He leaned back in his chair. The truth felt close but hidden behind fear. All these years the humans had chosen to stay behind glass instead of learning what the light really meant. The next day, he went back. To the barrier early. Sari was already there, waiting, her eyes warm like morning sun. She said, "You look like someone who has seen ghosts." He smiled softly. "Maybe I have. I found something about the first meeting." She looked curious. "What did you find?" He said, "I think the humans were wrong about the reaction. It was not death. Maybe your people were trying to heal us." She blinked slowly, like she was trying to understand. Then said softly, "Maybe our light tried to give what your kind was not ready." To take her words felt heavy but gentle at the same time. He nodded. "Maybe you are. Right." Fear closed the door before we could learn. She reached out slowly, her hand hovering near the glass, and said, "Fear is like cold light. It keeps you alive, but it stops you from feeling warmth." He looked at her fingers so close to his own only. "A thin wall between them," he whispered. "Maybe one day there will be no wall." She smiled softly. "Maybe one day." They sat together for a long time, saying little, only listening to the wind and the faint hum of the barrier. Sometimes her tail brushed against the glass and the field shimmered like a ripple in still water. The quiet moments between them felt bigger than words. When the sun began to set, she stood up slowly and said, "Tomorrow is the night of twin moons. My people gather to sing for light and peace. Maybe you can listen from your tower." He nodded. "I will listen." She gave a small bow, her eyes glowing gently under the soft red light of dusk, and said, "Good. Then you will hear what hope sounds like." She turned. Aurora 9 watched from there. Based some recorded readings, others talked about energy shifts, but Aaron stood alone near the barrier. He remembered Sari's words. "You will hear what hope sounds like." He waited quietly near the edge of the dome, looking toward the forest. For a long time there was only silence. Then a faint sound began, like wind moving through hollow wood. It grew into voices, soft at first, then stronger. Hundreds of tones layered together, rising and falling like waves. It was not just song. It was something deeper, something that reached the heart without asking for words. Sari's voice was among them, he could tell even from far away. Her tone was calm, like light touching water. The barrier around him pulsed gently with every sound, as if the music was part of the world itself. His instruments blinked warning signs, but he ignored them. He stood still, letting the sound flow through him. For the first time since he came to Lumea, he felt peace, not the kind made by silence, but the kind born from connection. The song went on for a long time, and when it faded, the world grew quiet again, but different, softer, as if the forest had exhaled after a long wait. The next morning he went out to the edge again. The air smelled of sweet rain. Sari was waiting her, silver hair shining in the weak sunlight. She smiled when she saw him. "You heard us," she said. "Yes, I did." He answered. "It was beautiful." She nodded the song. "Thanks." "The light for another year," he said. "I think your song did more than that. It changed the air. The readings on our system shifted." She laughed lightly. "Maybe your machines felt joy too." They both smiled and then fell silent for a while. Aaron wanted to tell her how much her song had moved him, but the words felt too heavy. She sat down on a rock near the barrier and said, "My people sing because memory fades. We sing so we don't forget who we are." He nodded slowly. That's the same reason we write stories. She tilted her head. Stories are songs trapped in symbols. He laughed softly. Maybe they are, she said then. Maybe you should write our song so your people remember too. He looked at her carefully and said, Maybe I will. As they talked, the air around them grew warmer. A strange golden shimmer passed across the field like sunlight. Through water, Sari noticed it first. The light hum changed tone. She frowned. Something is different, she said. He checked his console. The energy lines were unstable again. Maybe the storm left a crack. He said, I can fix it from inside. She looked worried. If the light breaks, will it hurt you? He smiled. Not if I'm careful. He opened a maintenance hatch and began to adjust the small power relays. The hum around them rose higher, then dropped suddenly. A flash of bright light crossed the field. Sari stepped. Back in surprise, the hum faded completely for a moment. Both of them stared. The barrier was gone just like that. The invisible wall that had divided their worlds for years was silent and still. The field had failed. Sari looked at Aaron, her golden, eyes wide. The world between them felt open and fragile like a dream. She whispered softly, The light is asleep. He took a slow breath. Yes, but it will wake soon, he said. Then she did something he never expected. She stepped closer, her bare feet touching the wet ground, her voice low and trembling. What if we touch now? Will the light be angry? He felt his pulse quicken. He should have said no. He should have called the others. But instead he said quietly, Maybe the light wants to know. 2. She lifted, her hand slowly, her fingers shaking. He did not move. He let her come close when her hand stopped a few inches from his. She hesitated. The air shimmered faintly as if holding its breath. He could see her eyes reflecting his face in their glow. Then, gently, she placed her hand on his. His skin tingled with warmth, not pain, not shock. Only calm light spread slowly from where their hands met. Soft, golden, like morning sun. It flowed around them like a quiet heartbeat. He could hear the hum return, but it was different now, not harsh but gentle. The field was alive again, rebuilding itself, but not as a wall, more like a soft mist that surrounded them instead of dividing them. Sari's eyes filled with tears. She whispered softly, I feel you, and he answered, I feel you too. Her voice broke slightly. We were told touch would hurt. He shook his head. Maybe it only hurts when there is fear. For a long moment they stood there surrounded by golden air. The rain from the leaves fell around them like shining drops. When the light finally dimmed, the barrier had returned, but weaker, softer. The machines no longer screamed warning. They only whispered low tones like lullabies. She stepped back slowly, her eyes still bright like sunrise. He looked at, his hands still warm from her touch. He knew something had changed, not only between them but in the world itself. She said quietly, Maybe now the light knows we mean no harm. He nodded and said, Maybe now we can start again. She smiled, then looked toward the forest, her voice soft like wind through grass. I will tell my people what I felt. They will believe you touched and the world did not break. He smiled and said, Tell them we are not ghosts behind glass. Tell them we are just people who forgot how to feel. She nodded once, then turned and walked back through the trees, the golden air following her until she was gone. Aaron stayed standing there under the quiet sky, the hum of the barrier still soft around him. The wall was back, but it no longer felt cold. It felt alive, as if waiting for something more. He looked at his hand again and whispered to himself, Maybe one touch can change everything. And for the first time he believed it. The next morning came with a soft fog over the valley. The sunlight struggled to break through the pale mist and the air smelled of wet earth. The human base stood quiet. The machines hummed with calm power. No alarms, no red lights. Everything looked peaceful. But inside, Aaron felt uneasy. He had not slept. All night he kept thinking about the moment when Sari touched his hand and the light did not harm them. It still felt unreal, like a dream too good to be true. Yet when he looked at his palm, he could still remember the warmth that stayed long after she was gone. He sat at his desk and reviewed the system logs. The barrier data showed something strange during the contact. The field had not failed. It had changed form, it had adapted to their energy, and stabilized itself. The computer marked it as unknown correction event. He stared at the line for a long time, his mind trying to understand it. This was proof the reaction between human and Lumian touch was not dangerous. It was harmony, but he also knew if command found out, they would erase it. They would say it was error and shut down contact again. He copied the file quietly and hid it in a private folder, then locked it with a code. No one else knew. He leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment, trying to calm his heart. He could not tell if he was afraid or happy. Maybe both. When the fog lifted a little, he went out to the barrier. Sari was already there, waiting, her silver hair damp from the mist, her golden eyes bright with quiet excitement. She smiled when she saw him. "I told my people," she said softly. "They listened, and what did they say?" he asked. She paused. "Some were afraid, some were angry. They think the light lies. But my grandmother said if the light was gentle, then truth was gentle too." He smiled. "Your grandmother is wise." Sari looked down her tail. "Move slowly," she said. "She wants to meet you someday." His heart skipped. He said softly, "I would like that very much." They both laughed quietly for a moment, the sound echoing softly across the glass like music. Then Sari said, "Your people will know soon." "Yes," he nodded. "They will. I don't know what they will do." She tilted her head, then said, "Humans always fear what they do not plan." He looked at her. "You speak as if you know us." She smiled. "I listen." A soft wind blew. Across the clearing, the air shimmered faintly as if the world remembered their touch. The machines behind him hummed lower, almost calm. Aaron looked around, then said, "Maybe the world itself wants peace." She closed her eyes for a second and said, "Our ancestors used to say the ground hears truth faster than people." He thought that was beautiful, simple and deep. He said, "Maybe that is why the ground always stays still when we argue." They both smiled again. Then she reached for her flute, the one she used before to heal the light. She said, "I made a new song. It is not from my people, it is from me for you." He felt a strange warmth rise in his chest. She raised the flute and began to play. The notes were gentle, slow, and full of something that felt like sunlight through water. It wasn't like her last song. This one sounded like a story, a meeting between two souls who should have never met but did anyway. Each note seemed to say, "Thank you," without words. He listened in silence, afraid to breathe. When she stopped, he said softly, "That was beautiful." She looked at him and said, "Then you must promise to remember it." He nodded. "I will." She smiled. "Good, because the sky remembers songs too." They stood quietly for a long time until his wrist comm suddenly beeped. A voice called, "Aaron, report to control." Immediately he froze. Sari saw his expression and asked softly, "They know?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, they always watch the readings." He turned the mic off quickly and said, "They might come to ask questions. Do not come close for a while." She frowned. "Are they angry?" He sighed. "I don't know, maybe afraid again." She looked sad. "Fear again?" He said, "Yes." "Fear again?" Before he left, he said softly, "Whatever happens, do not lose faith." She nodded. "I will wait." She touched her flute gently against the barrier. The light around it shimmered faint gold, then faded. He looked at her one last time before turning back toward the base, his heart heavy. Inside the control room, Commander Harris stood near the console, staring at the screens. The data from the barrier shimmered with strange energy readings. He looked at Aaron and said, "What happened during the storm? Why is the barrier reading new frequencies?" Aaron hesitated for a moment, then said, "Maybe the storm changed the system." Harris frowned. "This pattern is biological. The field reacted to life, not to power." "Did you make contact with the Lumian?" Aaron stayed silent. Harris stared at him harder. "You did, didn't you?" Aaron finally said quietly, "Nothing bad happened, sir. She saved one of us during the storm. She healed the light." The commander shook his head. "That's impossible. The old records show contact kills both species." Aaron stepped forward and said, "Maybe the old records were wrong." Harris turned away from him and said, "We are not here to test myths. We are here to observe and report." He ordered the system to strengthen the barrier again, double the power line, and restrict all field access. Aaron wanted to argue, but he stayed silent. He knew words would not change fear. Later that night, when everyone slept, he went back to the console alone. He opened the folder where he saved the hidden data. He played the recording of the moment. He and Sari had touched the screen, glowed gold like sunlight trapped in glass. He watched it over and over, each time the same truth stared back. The light did not destroy, it healed. He looked out through the dome into the dark forest. He could almost see her standing there waiting among the glowing trees. He whispered softly, "I won't let them hide this truth." He copied the file into a small data chip and placed it in his pocket. Outside, the world was quiet. Only the wind and the hum of the repaired barrier filled the air. In the distance, he thought he heard a soft flute playing, faint but clear. It drifted across the night like a promise. He closed his eyes and smiled. Maybe the light was already choosing its side. Maybe peace had already begun, and neither wall nor fear could stop it now. The next day began with a strange stillness. The sun rose over Lumea quietly, and the forest glowed like gold dust floating in soft air. Everything looked calm. But inside the human base, tension hung heavy. The system had recorded strange new signals again. The higher command from Earth had sent a message. They wanted answers. They wanted to know why the barrier was changing. Commander Harris moved through the hall, giving sharp orders. People worked, fast-typing, scanning, checking energy lines, but no one really knew what they were looking for. Only Aaron Diety sat quietly at his station, pretending to study numbers, while his thoughts were far beyond the glass. He had not seen Sari since the night before, but he could feel her presence like a soft warmth that refused to fade. He remembered her last words, "I will wait." And he believed she was waiting somewhere among those glowing trees in the afternoon. A small ship from orbit landed beside the main dome. Men in white suits stepped out. Scientists from Central Control. They carried sealed tablets and scanners. They spoke in low, serious voices. One of them looked at the readings and said, "The barrier is not reacting to human frequency anymore. It's adapting to something else." Commander Harris asked. "What does that mean?" the man said. "It means your field is learning." Aaron listened from the side. His heart beat faster. The scientist continued, "If this keeps going, the field will merge into the environment. Will lose isolation completely." Harris frowned. "Isolation is safety." The man nodded. "Maybe, but it's changing on its own, as if it doesn't want to stay separate." That night, Aaron sat alone at the control panel. He looked through the clear dome at the forest. The moons were rising again, painting the world silver and blue. He touched the pocket where he kept the small data chip, the proof of everything he and Sari had discovered. He knew he couldn't hide it forever, but he also couldn't let it be buried by fear. He thought of her face the moment she touched his hand, her eyes full of light and wonder. He whispered to himself, "Maybe tonight I'll see her again." He left the control room quietly and walked toward the outer edge of the dome. The air was cool. The grass shimmered with dew. As he reached the barrier line, he stopped. The hum sounded softer than before, more like breathing than a wall. And then he saw her, Sari, standing by the trees, her silver hair shining under the twin moons. She smiled when she saw him. "You came?" he said softly. "I had to." She stepped closer to the barrier. It glowed faintly around her like sunlight caught in mist. She said, "Your people are restless. I can feel their fear." He nodded. "They think the world is changing too fast." She tilted her head. "Maybe it is not the world. Maybe it is the heart of man, changing at last." He smiled sadly. Maybe. They stood there facing each other, silent for a long moment, the air between them alive with quiet power. Then Sari said, "I told my grandmother about your light," she said, "long ago. Our ancestors met humans before the Great Silence. She said the sky told them humans carried hearts that could burn or heal depending on what they believed." Aaron looked at her surprised. "I think your grandmother understands us better than we do ourselves." Sari smiled softly. "Maybe she remembers what we forgot." A gentle wind passed between them, carrying tiny glowing petals from the trees they floated against the barrier, and vanished in sparks of gold. Sari watched them fall and said softly, "Maybe this wall is tired too." Aaron looked at the shimmering surface. It pulsed faintly with every word they spoke. He said, "Maybe it doesn't want to divide anymore. Maybe it wants to listen," as they stood there. The ground trembled slightly. The machines at the base hummed louder. Something in the energy field was shifting again. A soft wave of golden light began to spread through the air. Both of them turned toward it. The barrier shimmered like a curtain of water, then slowly began to fade. Alarms echoed inside the dome, red lights flashed, people shouting through the comms. "The system is collapsing," someone yelled. Aaron ignored the noise. He stared at Sari, her eyes wide with awe. The air between them rippled like a heartbeat. The light from the barrier began to twist and wrap around them. Instead of standing between them, it circled them both like a soft ring of fire. Sari took a small step forward. Aaron did not move when she reached him. The golden air wrapped around their hands. The same warmth returned, gentle calm. Endless, the forest around them glowed brighter. The trees hummed with sound. The humans in the dome watched through the glass, unable to look away. No explosion, no danger, just a field of living light spreading from two people who refused to be afraid. Inside the dome, the readings changed again. The scientists whispered, "Impossible." "The energy is synchronizing, not fighting." Harris stared through the window, speechless. The field pattern had turned into a perfect balance, two waves, human and Lumian, blending into one. Outside, Sari looked up at Aaron. The light dancing in her eyes, she said softly, "Maybe this is what the sky wanted." All along. He nodded, unable to speak. She smiled and said, "Then the promise is kept." She reached up and touched his cheek gently. The light pulsed once brighter, then softened, spreading through the forest like dawn. Breaking, the world was silent. No machines, no alarms, just peace. When the light faded, the barrier was gone completely. The air was clean, the hum replaced by birds and wind. The humans stepped out slowly for the first time, without masks, without fear. Sari's people came from the forest, standing tall, their eyes curious. Not afraid, neither side moved for a while. Then Sari looked at Aaron and smiled. She took his hand and led him forward across the place where the wall used to stand. He followed her step by step until they were surrounded by both species, humans and Lumians together, no glass between, no fear. Commander Harris stood watching quietly. He lowered his weapon and said softly to his team, "Record this, no one will believe it." The scientist beside him whispered, "Maybe belief is the last thing we need. Maybe we only need to see the moons climbed higher." Their light falling over both people. Sari looked up at the sky and said, "See? The light does not choose sides. It only shines for those who let it touch them." Aaron smiled and said, "Then maybe we are finally learning to shine too." As the night deepened, the two stood together at the center of the clearing. Her tail swayed softly, his hand still in hers around them. The golden air still lingered like memory of peace. Not just between human and Lumian, but between fear and hope. The world of Lumia was no longer divided. It had become one song, one breath, one shared promise. Under two moons and far above in the quiet sky, the Aurora 9 sent its final message to Earth, not a report of danger, not a call for retreat, only four simple words that carried everything. The light healed us all.